Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about logic. And as you'll notice, my computer screen's really big. Basically, I'm zooming in on the program because as I demonstrate this logic, I really want you to look at the ladder logic and the program and watch the contacts as they open and close and the circuit go across and watch as we trip inputs and outputs coming on. I really want you to watch this because most electricians are not familiar with seeing these programs. And after all, you can just imagine I'm actually in the background pushing these buttons, and you'll probably see some lights and going off in the background, and that's just pretty much my outputs. But you don't need to be watching me do that. You need to really be focusing in on the program. So you may miss my beautiful face, but we're just going to really focus in on the program with regard to the logic, because I really think that you'll learn it better if you see the diagram of the logic and then you see it as it works and you have me explain it. Okay. Oh, by the way, I promised a corny joke last video, didn't I? Okay. Okay, my 8-year-old told me this one just last week. Why do cows wear bells? Once again, why do cows wear bells? Okay, at the end of this video, I'll tell you the punchline. You'll have to wait till then. Hopefully that keeps you interested in watching this video, right? But no, so why do cows wear bells? That's the joke, and we'll get into the logic so that I don't digress too much. Okay, as you will see, most of what I've demonstrated so far was a simple, hey, I turned an input on and an output goes on, and that's just pretty much your simple momentary on, your momentary make a contact and on. That's what I've started with because that's what you've seen before. So I1, which is my photo sensor, when I trip it on, it'll turn on the output, right? Like that. You can probably see the green hue. You can see in the program that my contact closed, so my output is on. You can see input 1, I have tripped on, and so my output 1's on. You can see that. That's pretty much what it looks like in the program, and that's a pictorial representation of what the PLC is seeing. So I let it go. So that's pretty much just a momentary on-off type of thing, right? Now we're really going to get into the logic, okay? This is a holding circuit. Now, if any of you were in apprenticeship school, in my 3rd year of apprenticeship school, we learned about holding circuits, and we saw a lot of diagrams like this. This is how a holding circuit was drawn. Spoiler alert, this is actually a holding circuit, and these are the two same things, but I wanted to show you, if you're familiar with this type of holding circuit, really in the PLC, you'll see what's called a set circuit and a reset circuit, and it's basically the same thing, so I'm just kind of showing you that. So anyway, the idea of the holding circuit is we have a momentary input, and okay, so we have a momentary input, and it activates our output, and the contacts on our output that get activated that were normally open will close, and the output will keep itself on until our stop, our normally closed contact there, our stop opens, and then it stops the holding circuit. So I'm going to demonstrate that. I'm going to push my I4. It's just a momentary switch, right? You'll notice I push it and it closed. My output's on, but then when I release it, it opens and my output stays on. Why? Because this coil, output 2 coil, has a contact and it has stayed closed. So basically the output is keeping itself on until we press the stop, which opens this normally closed contact like that. And of course it went off, but my computer wasn't fast enough. So it looks like that. Every now and then my computer's actually fast enough. So anyway, let's try it again so that my computer hopefully will be fast enough and you'll see it in real time. So you saw it close, engage, and then you saw it open, and of course it disengaged. Like I say, my computer's kind of slow, but the PLC is faster, which is probably a good thing. You want your PLC to be fast, right? So now we saw a holding circuit, momentary on, and then off, right? Now this is the same thing. I press the contact, and of course we have to wait for the computer, and it closes, the contact is on, and I have released my finger from the input, it's opened, but you've noticed that set coil, even though it doesn't show red, you can see from the red hue that the output is on. So we have to push our reset, and that resets it. So once again, the secondary, the second set and reset coil, which the reason why I'm showing you this is because in a ladder diagram of a PLC, you'll probably see it this way versus this way, but either way you see it, you'll at least know, right? So the PLC version of the set and reset coil, once again, on, I push my momentary impulse and then I let it go and it stays on, and then I push my reset contactor or my reset input, and it turns off. So that's just pretty much the difference between this version of a holding circuit and this version. They're basically the same thing. So right now I'm going to pause the video. I'm going to load another program to show you some more logic. So if you see it kind of turn off and turn on, you'll know what's going on. I'm just basically loading other stuff because I don't want to load too much logic on here and make things confusing, because I'm an easy person to confuse, and sometimes my demonstrations get a little confusing if I have too much going on in the program. So I'm going to pause, I'm going to load another program, and then we'll talk about some more logic, okay? Okay, so I've loaded my next program. As you can see, I'm really just dealing with simple programs just to show you. We're not going to get anything too complex right now. We're just talking about logic, and I just don't want to confuse things. So anyway, here's what I call positive logics. These are and or logics. What these are is we have normally open contacts, and when an input is applied, it produces an output. The AND logic, basically you have these inputs in series, I3 and I4 are in series, so both of them need to be applied for an output. That's AND logic. I3 and I4 need to be applied for the output. So we're going to show that. Let's see, I3, my computer's behind. Okay, so I3 just got, I3 just sent an input signal and nothing happened. Why? Because I4 is not on. So once I send an input to I4, all of a sudden, as you can see by the hue, the output turned on. And once I release I4, the output turns off. If I push I4, the output turns back on. If I release I3, the output turns off. So you can kind of see the AND logic, right? Both of these need to be engaged. Both inputs need to be engaged for the output. Okay. Now the OR logic, IB or IC, either one can make an output. As you see, this part of the control circuit is in parallel, therefore either or. So an AND is both, one and the other inputs need to be engaged for an output. This either or will produce the output, right? So either IB produces the output, as you can see, I close the contact's closed, output is there, right? So B is closed, B is shown as closed, output is there. I release it, remember the OR, the C, so I close the C contact, and the output is there again. So that's AND and OR logic. Like I say, whenever you see a normally open contact, you can usually look for one of the positive logics, which means when an input or a couple of inputs or a number of inputs are engaged, then you'll get the output. Okay, so now I'm going to pause this video again, and I'm going to load what I call my negative logics, and we will talk about those. Okay, so now we're going to talk about what I term as negative logic. Now, I don't know if that's the correct term or not. Like I told you in a video before, I'm a self-taught person, so I don't really know what the correct term for this group of logics is, but I call it negative logic because basically when an input is not engaged, that's when the output happens. So I call it negative logic, and it kind of, you'll have to forgive me, I may come up with some wrong words, like I may say a circuit is closed when it's open or open when it's closed, and that's just because my brain doesn't work with this negative logic stuff very well. So if I say the wrong thing, preemptively, forgive me, just kind of watch what I do, and you'll get the idea, but I'll try to be careful with how I term things so I'm not too confusing. So as you can see here, of course, you're just looking at the computer screen, but as you can see, one thing about this, one difference between the positive logics and the negative logics is the negative logics all have normally closed contacts. And what this means is, and you will see it printed this way in any kind of diagram, you will see normally closed contacts. And what that means is when there is no signal, when there is no voltage to the inputs, these contacts are closed, which means that the outputs are on. So to turn the outputs off, we have to engage contacts. It's a little bit confusing for me, but that's kind of what we have to do, right? So as you can see by the hue in the background, all my outputs are on. It shows my outputs are on, but none of the inputs are on. So that's why I kind of call it negative logic. It's kind of weird. So let's start with the bottom. That's actually easiest to work from the bottom up. I should have thought about this and probably flipped all the programs. But anyways, let's start with the bottom, not logic. That's the most simple one. Not logic just means when when one single input is not engaged, the output is on, right? So as you can see, this says I3. My I3 is not engaged and my output Q3 is on. When I engage my I3, you notice, I don't know if you can see the hue change colors or whatever, but you'll notice on the computer screen, my I3 opened because I actually engaged it. See, it was normally closed, so it was closed when there was no voltage. Now that I engaged it, it's open and there is no output, and that's why that output turned off, okay? So that's not logic. When an input is not engaged, the output is on. Okay, now, NOR logic is very similar. Neither, this is I1 and I2. These are my photo sensors. So input 1 or input 2. If either input 1 or input 2 are engaged, the voltage is sent to the inputs, then they will open and the output will be off. That's NOR logic. So I'm going to trip, well, I just tripped input 2. As you can see, it opened up and stopped the output. Input 2 is engaged, as you can see, but yet output 2, which this is designated, is off. Now you'll notice output 2 turned back on when my input 2 signal stopped and returned to normally closed. Likewise, input 1, I open it up, signal stops, output 2 is off because input 1 is on. That's NOR logic, neither or. NAND logic, not this and not this, which basically these two inputs are in parallel, so as if both of them are engaged, they open up the circuit and stop the output. So it's kind of like a not one and not the other. Not input 4 and not input 3. If either one's on, then the output stays on, so you got to turn them both. You got to engage both of these inputs to open up the contacts to disengage the output, right? So let's do that one. I4. You see I4 opened up, but yet output 1 is still on, right? Even though I4 is open. Why? Because, or I'm sorry, that was I3. Because I4. Now, let's see here. There we go. See, I opened up I4. So now that both of these inputs are engaged, see, actually it's IB. I'm sorry, my eyes aren't very good. IB and I3 are both engaged. So the normally closed contacts opened up and output 1 stopped being on. Output 1's no longer on. So those are kind of your what I term as your negative logics. When they're normally closed, like you see here, and that's what you will see on the ladder diagrams of the plans that are in the PLC. That's what you see on the ladder diagrams. They're normally closed contacts. When an impulse is sent to the input terminal, then they open up and they stop the output. I'm going to pause this video and I'm going to load the next logics and we'll go from there. Thank you. Yes. Okay, this is my next set of logic. This is just actually an exercise. This is a box sorting exercise. What you'll notice is I zoomed out to where you can see a little bit more of the background because I want you to see kind of how I'm activating these inputs. But the main thing is still watching the program. As you'll see, we have AND logic. We talked about that just a few minutes ago. And we have a little, what would you call it? That's a negative logic. That would be like a not logic, basically. What this is input 2, my photo sensor down here. If it is tripped, this input 3, this is a contact for coil 3. It is closed. So the circuit is complete. If you have a small box and it trips input 2 on, there will be a green light that turns on. However, if your big box is big enough to trip both of the photo sensors, the red light will turn on with this output and it will open over here to where you don't have the red and the green turning on at the same time. So this would be kind of like if you need to sort different sizes of things, you can have 2 photo sensors, and if something is big enough to cover both photo sensors and trip them off, maybe an arm will make it go one to one basket or whatever, or a conveyor may go one direction, or you know, if you have something that's small, maybe it goes where the small boxes go, or if you have something that's big, it goes where the big items go. So we're just going to kind of look at that. Okay, I'm going to get some boxes and we're going to look at that. Okay, so right now I'm getting a small box. I have a small box, and as you can see, if I just kind of place it down, it's a small box, right? So it closed photo sensor I2 right down there. It closed it, and it's just showing that it's a small box. And then I will get a big box. Right now I have a big box. If I position my big box, you'll notice the red light turned on. And that's because basically both photo sensors were tripped. The output of the red turned on and the coil from that output opened up, which keeps the green light from tripping. So that's kind of a little box sorting type of logic that has a little bit of AND and a little bit of NOT. I'm going to put a pause on it, and then we're going to get into some Boolean logic, which you'll be able to see how we can combine a lot of these logics in a simple program so that different combinations of inputs will turn on outputs or not. Okay, so let me pause it and I'll get back with you in a second. Okay, one thing you'll notice right off the bat is this looks a little bit different than the ladder logic that I've been showing you before. This is just a function block diagram program. So this is a function block diagram, and you'll see a little bit of that in the next videos coming up, because you can just get a lot more functions out of that. So let's take a look at what this is. This is a Boolean logic, and you'll notice there's 4 inputs. They're over here, and so input 1, 2, 3, and 4. You can have 1 input, 2 inputs, 3 inputs, 4 inputs, whatever, and it opens up this table. And 0 means off, 1 means on. So, like for example, this line, if input 1 is off and input 1's on, and then input 2 through 3 are off, then I have an output. Okay? I also will get an output if 2 and 3 are on, but 1 and 4 are off. And then let's see, okay, yes. And I also get an output if 4 is on, but neither 1, 2, or 3 are on. Okay? So what this does is, let's see here, my input 1 is actually I3, which is this toggle switch. Okay, so we'll start with this toggle switch. When this is on, I get an output. When this is on by itself. When this red push button is on by itself, I get an output. When the 2 middle push buttons are on by themselves, I get an output. But any other combination, for example, if I have 3 of these on, or if I have this toggle switch on with another push button or whatever, any other combination will not produce an output. So there's a lot of, and this would be like an and logic with these two being the inputs that produce the output. This will be an or logic with either this toggle switch or this push button being the input that produces the output. So we've got some or logic, we've got some and logic, and we've also got some not logic. I mean, if I'm going to turn on this toggle switch and I cannot have on this to have an output. So I'm going to pause this, I'm going to load this program, and I will demonstrate in real time and in actuality how this works. But as you can see, we have a table with a lot of different combinations, and this is a really easy way to put some and logic, some or logic, some not logic. All these logics we've learned, we can kind of combine them in this Boolean format. Okay, I've loaded this this simple Boolean program. So as you remember by the table, the toggle switch is this input 3, which is actually, according to the logic, the first input. But this being engaged will give us an output. The fourth input into the Boolean being engaged will give us an output. The second and third will give us an output, but no other combination, any other combination, and no output, okay? So the first, see, and hopefully you can see the red line, it's tripping the Boolean output on, which is true. Turn it on and it trips the output. My computer kind of lags behind sometimes. There we go. Now the fourth input, the push button, it produces the output by itself. So we've demonstrated the first and the fourth one by themselves produce the output. And of course the second and third one together will produce the output. That's what we talked about on the table. But what about any other combination? What if I have my first one on and I push my fourth one? Oh, so the two inputs being on, if you can see the red line, do not produce the output, which is right according to my table. My second and third one that do produce the output, well, what happens if I turn a fourth one on? Let me see how many fingers I can get on this. Yeah, see, no output. What happens if I just push either 2 or 3? No output. So as you can see, the outputs happen with what was set. The first output, the first input produces an output. The fourth input produces an output. Second and third produce an output, but really no other combination do. Okay, so that's kind of a Boolean logic, and that is how you can combine a lot of these logics together, because we had or logic between these two inputs, we had and logic, and then we had some not logic. We can have this and the input 2 and 3 produce an output, but not any of the others. So we just kind of had a combination of logics. So that concludes our demonstration of logics. Of course, there's other types of logics in this, but I just wanted to not bore you with every detail in the world and just kind of give you the basics of logic. I guess to round out, I need to give you the punchline to the joke, don't I? So the joke was, why do cows wear bells? Because their horns don't work. But sorry. Anyway, I'm here all day, right? But that's our logic, and I think next video we will talk about timers, and then we'll talk about counters, and then we'll talk about some of the math functions, and we're just going to kind of get into what all these little boxes called PLCs, what all is in there, what else they're capable of. Like I say, remember, I'm not teaching you to be a programmer. I'm just kind of teaching you what they're capable of, what it looks like on the program, so that you will know if you're ever in a troubleshooting situation, hey, I've got one of these PLCs. I need to know what's going on in there. Maybe I should ask for a diagram, and then when you read the ladder diagram, because you've seen this, you'll kind of understand it, and it'll just make life so much easier for you the more you understand this stuff. So like I say, we're not trying to be programmers. We're just trying to understand what's going on, okay? So until the next video, thank you, and we'll be seeing you later.